Hey guys, what is going on? Shaw here, and today we're going to be taking a look into Spires of Ascension kind of trash tips, which is kind of a horrible title for this video. But essentially what I want to do is I want to walk through some dungeons and talk about specific mobs, specific pulls, very specific mobs and buffs or debuffs or ways and strategies to tackle certain packs. I've been pugging a lot lately on my shaman, which is actually going to be the footage from this video today in the Spires. It seems like a lot of players don't know a whole lot about like really little tips. Some dungeons have more kind of tricks to them than others. So I felt like Spires was a key that I've been running a lot, and I've noticed that a lot of just general pugs don't have the greatest insight into these dungeons. So essentially this guide is supposed to be general just tips and tricks to how to handle some trash mobs. And I'm going to be covering it from different points of view, whether it's from DPS healing or tanking. I'm going to try to walk through everything here and just break down some of the important things that I've picked up from just running way too many keys this season, like an unhealthy amount. So we're going to dive right into the Spires. So starting it off, we actually are going to be approaching the top of the staircase, which is the first like pull. Like you start at the bottom of this, I guess up here, you start at the very bottom. And you move your way up, so depending on how many mobs you pull, how fast you get here. But this should be like the second or third pull of the dungeon. Sometimes it's the fourth pull if your group's really slow. So the big thing here is the Mender. So this Mender mob is really interesting because you actually can get a lot of damage out of this guy. A lot of people don't know this. So he will cast a spell on himself called Mender Weapon. And this is a purgeable spell that when you purge it, so here it comes out now. So Mender Weapon just finished the cast. He now has a 5-stack of the buff. So what if I do this? So what I did is I purged, right? So I purged him, and there's this tiny hammer over here on the left-hand side of the pack. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to slow this down because I'm not using that kind of software. But if I back this up 10 seconds, you're going to see me kind of do my opener. Mender Weapon goes off. I purge it. You're going to see the weapon pop out to the left here. If you walk over this weapon, it's going to give you that same buff that he had. I'll do it here because the melee wasn't doing it. You'll see this buff pop up in the corner. So the same buff that he had. And what this does, it does additional damage for every attack you do. The big thing here is it only really affects melee. If you're a caster, it's not going to affect your spells. It's only going to affect like melee swings or melee attacks. So it's better for melee to pick it up. I dispelled it to see if he was going to pick it up, and he didn't. So I ended up doing it just to kind of show it for this video. If you saw me auto attack there, it's just going to do additional damage. So it's a good way to get either priority damage into a certain target or help kind of cleave down a pack a little bit faster. If I'm not mistaken, it does scale with key level, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But essentially it's going to net you like anywhere between 20 to 40k damage depending on critical strike chance. So highly recommend picking this weapon up. And if you can purge, so if you're a warlock, hunter, shaman, I think if a mage does it, it gives them the buff with spell steal. But I'm not entirely sure. Demon hunters, blood elves, obviously. So if you're any of these like classes or blood elf obviously is a race, you can dispel this buff. So you're going to want to keep an eye out for it. If you don't dispel it, it's going to do additional damage to your tank, which is magic damage, and they can't mitigate that as well. So either way, whether someone picks it up or not, dispelling it is going to help your tank out. So that was tip number 1. Moving on to tip number 2. All right. So the second tip is going to be for these Stealthclaws. Stealthclaws are obviously a pain. Anyone who's tanked before or anyone who's just noticed their tank just get absolutely fucking clapped here, it's because Stealthclaws do a pounce ability onto the tank, and it stuns them for 2 seconds, and it doesn't have a diminishing return. So if they keep getting pounced on by the cats that are popping out of stealth, they can get stunned for like upwards of like 5, 6, 7 seconds, which is obviously not good. I'm typically the tank player, so I have ways that I like to get these mobs out, but there's tons of classes who can. Mass Root, if there's a nearby mob, Mass Root can pull them out of stealth. Earth Grab Totem can pull them out of stealth. Flare, Spectral Sight, any kind of AoE ability, so throwing down an Earthquake, throwing down a Flame Strike, throwing down a Blizzard, will do damage, will pull them out of stealth. It won't make them pounce anymore, and then your tank can pick up aggro. You just want to be careful on how much damage you do. So Earthquake isn't necessarily the best ability to do, but like a Blizzard, a Flame Strike, an Arcane Explosion, I'm very specific, I'm honed in on mages right now, but all of these things work. What most tanks do is they typically just use an AoE ability, so I think here you're going to see the Monk. I think in this clip I think he's spinning crane kicks, but I don't remember. But Shaman specifically can even drop totems. So right here, I think I'm throwing out an Earthbind totem, and it baits out one of the Stealthclaws. If you're lucky and you put it in between two, they'll both pounce on it at the same time. I didn't get lucky here. So what I did is I Earthbound one, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop an I normally would drop an in-cap totem. In this clip, though, I didn't have it on cooldown, or it was still on cooldown. So Stealthclaws, you're going to want to get out of stealth because they destroy your tank. They'll put up the bleeds early, they stun them, they can't mitigate. They can't use, obviously, like personal defensives. Things like survival instincts or shield wall or fortifying brew, like those things can't be used when the tank is stunned. So getting them out of stealth and then letting your tank grab aggro is probably the best way to typically do this. I don't see running all these pug keys on my shaman. I wasn't seeing anyone do that. I was doing my best to get the Stealthclaws out. If everyone in your group helps, it's always a plus. One thing you can do is have a turtle or have a hunter turtle and just run through all of them. It baits the pounce. They don't take any damage. And then the monk or the tank specifically can just pick up aggro. So that's tip number 2. So tip number 3 is going to happen throughout the dungeon, depending on which pulls you do. I'm going to let this play and I'll just talk about it. Feel free to judge my really poor performance on the DPS meters. These rebellious fists, first off, shamans can kick them all the time. They're typically about 12 seconds apart. Each cast, it's about 10 or 12 seconds apart. Their casts are actually based on their energy. So it takes 50 energy for them to cast it at a normal speed. So when you first pull them, they'll always have 100 energy. When they cast it, it absorbs 50 energy. And then if you kick it, they lose that energy, nothing, like they don't get it back or anything like that. And then their next cast, they have 50 energy again and they'll use it. During their like recharge is when they're getting energy back. So you want to break the shield as fast as possible. If they don't have 50 energy, they'll still recast it, but it won't be as fast. Meaning like it takes them a longer time to register that they have energy to cast it. So if you happen to get if he recharges 60 and he goes to cast it once using 50 energy and then you kick it and then he has 10 energy, the next kick should be a little bit longer or have more time in between each kick before you have to kick again. The other thing too about Rebellious Fist is that you can actually outrange it. It's only a 30-yard range, so range players can back up. I do a poor job here. I'm in melee. Part of that comes down to where the tank's pulling them. He decides to, for some reason, tanks feel like kiting all the time, which is I'm not going to get into it. Anyways, you can typically, if your range stay back a little bit, can actually just straight up outrange this Rebellious Fist. So if you have a full range group like we did here, outside of the tank, you can honestly just not even worry about kicking these because they won't do any damage to your group. You can kick them, obviously, if you have the resources, but when you're playing with like a Boomkin and a Hunter, you might not always have the kicks up for every single cast. So just kind of a cool tip. So you can outrange it. They do take energy, and then the shield is when they're recharging it, and it takes 50 energy to cast. That was tip number 3. Moving on. So I kind of thought this was like a normal thing everyone knew, but I guess not. These squad leaders, you're going to see them dispersed throughout. If you go to the groups, like to come to this right side first or going to the south after first boss, because you're not going to see as many squad leaders. So if your group has more like general AoE damage, it's better to have less squad leaders. But the squad leaders, regardless, you're going to see them on both sides. They reduce the damage taken by area of effects by like, I think it's 75%, 70 or 75%. It's up there, right? So like AoE abilities in general are going to get nerfed pretty significantly. So if you have a Boomkin, like things like Starfall is going to be doing significantly less damage when a squad leader is active. And actually in that case, like most AoE abilities don't do as much damage. There's like some weird things like Chain Lightning still does full damage for some reason, because I think each attack is technically direct, but like Earthquake does less damage. So squad leaders need to die ASAP all the time, as soon as you can. You want to use cooldowns to get this guy down. Now in a pull like this, it doesn't really matter because there's just a squad leader and the Praetor. Now in the pull following this, which I'll fast forward to actually right now. So in this pull, on either side, no matter which way you come from, there is going to be one of those squad leaders. Those squad leaders, if they don't die, the tank isn't generating a lot of threat on those other mobs because they have reduced area of effect damage. And the pull's just going to take longer. There's going to be more damage that's coming out. You can't effectively like cleave, even if you're using cooldowns. Like if I use like a Stormkeeper, like just try to go into a lot of Earthquake spams, it's not going to do really any damage here. Things like Thrash are less effective, Keg Smash is less effective, Thunderclap's less effective. So for tank players, it's going to significantly reduce the amount of threat generation you're going to have, which threat generation is already an issue, but it's going to become a further problem if your DPS aren't killing it. So you need to make sure your DPS know that when there is a squad leader, that is the highest priority by far. Like, you shouldn't even be really AoEing unless it's going to amplify your single target. Naturally, as a hypocrite that I am, I'm saying that, and then I'm going to go into like a full burst here with like Stormkeeper and Ellie. But that's, I think I die immediately here. Oh yeah, I rip aggro so fast, and just get slapped. So I'm gonna die here, but I'm not gonna play anymore. So again, squad leaders, just die as fast as possible. That's tip number 4. Side note, this isn't really a tip, but I'm going to be covering this boss, Ventunax, in a future boss guide coming up in just probably a couple days now. I'm working on Mordratha now, and then I'll have Ventunax soon. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that will be coming. So this boss is unique because the positioning is really important for the tank. And if you pull the boss to weird spots, it actually creates less area for your DPS to stand, especially range. If range have to move, they're going to lose so much damage. So I'll be doing that in the near future. But for now, I'm just letting this play because I'm pumping here. I'm so bad at shaman too. I haven't played shaman in like months, so I was trying to gear it up. Anyways, we're gonna move on to the next tip. All right, so I've seen a lot of groups know about the skip, but I feel like a lot of people don't execute it necessarily well because they don't understand exactly how aggro range works. So there's this Hellion at the top of the stairs. You just need to be careful about where you're walking. You can walk in front of this brazier. This guy pops an invis pop for some reason, despite us we talked about invising up at the top. But you generally, I found the safest way to get around here, instead of you can walk around if you're very, very careful about hugging this edge, but you want to be careful you don't have enough, like if you have too much movement speed, you might inch too close to this Hellion. You can actually jump here. You just jump over this brazier, you just stand still, jump up, move forward a little bit, jump up again, and then that should put you in a spot just to walk right over. So not too much of an issue. It's when you get to the top that's kind of goofy. Except this isn't going to be super great to talk about because I'm Venthyr and I think I could just door up shadows. But at this point here, you want to make sure you can get some kind of CC on this guy. Typically, Sap and Imprison are going to be your best CCs here when skipping because they won't put anyone in combat. Any other type of CC will. If I hexed here, if we frozen trap, if we like root him for some stupid reason. Something that monks can do though is if you paralysis when you're far enough away and throw down a ring of peace to knock him like over back this way. So paralysis and ring him away, that'll create enough gap where you can walk through. The other option is you can actually stand right here and jump up. Obviously, there's other classes like Venthyr here. So Venthyr, like you can Dwarf Shadows if you're playing Venthyr. I play Venthyr Shaman because I think it's really fun, and I play Resto, and it's pretty good cooldown for that. So this guy is just, I think, an idiot, and I think he ends up pulling this stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so he pulls it. He walks around without CCing him, which is just not good. And then the other thing is you can see this guy's on a two-person mount. If you have someone who's able to get up and then get on a two-person mount, you can actually like eject the NPC passenger and then have people jump on and jump off to jump up on this ledge, which is kind of like a cool little thing that I do sometimes in my group, but most of the time I run with a rogue, so we just shroud all the way through, so it's not even a problem. So CCing this guy and like getting up here, you can stand on this right side of this pillar. You're far enough away and you can just jump up. So not a big issue, but CCs obviously make this a lot smoother. That was tip number 5, 6. I lost count already. All right, moving on. All right, so I had to swap to a different clip because we did a different strategy with invis pots in that last video. So you're gonna notice I have a different group, Mage GC, I think here. So this skip, a lot of people know, essentially what it does is you pull these usurpers all the way to this pillar here. The issue that I see a lot of people do is that they follow the tank immediately. So what's going to happen here is you're essentially going to get there's a proximity radius, or if that doesn't even make sense. There's a certain proximity to these ads that will put you in combat with them, which targets you with the Hurl cast. And as most of you know, on fortified weeks especially, Hurl, especially if you get hit by like 2 or 3 at the same time, is going to probably flat out one-shot you. Maybe not a 12 key. I was farming for bracers here, so I was like farming like 11s through 15s. I don't need to explain that to you guys. So what needs to happen is the tank needs to run through, get to this pillar, and the mobs need to be near the pillar before you even start running. What I notice a lot of people do is they follow the tank like this druid here. So the druid's running right after him, and you're going to see like the Druid and the DK are getting slapped by Hurls because they ran right after the tank and were being targeted. Where Peanut and I, the mage and myself, weren't taking damage at all because we were smart about staying back far enough. You want these mobs to be on the pillar. They have such a small health pool that like you waiting a couple of seconds to run to the pillar after the tank, like, yeah, it might lower your DPS a little bit in the overall, but staying alive is going to be so much more beneficial for timing the key. You time the key and help your group get down this trash without dying. It's never fun to die. It's never fun to lose your buffs. So that's the big tip there, is just like wait for your tank to make it to the pillar and wait for the Forsworn to also follow and make it to the pillar as well, so you can line of sight easier. This also gives you a chance to like CC mobs by like for example, like putting down Incap Totem, getting in with a Dragon's Breath. You know, I don't know what DKs can necessarily do. Unholy DKs, they don't have like a mass CC. So essentially anything you can't, Shockwave, like there's so many things you can do once they're grouped up. But if you run in right away, you're going to die and take a lot of damage, or take a lot of damage, I should say. So that was pretty much that tip. And then last but not least, let's see, where this is just the general boss fight. So you need to go up with pretty much like 86, 87% trash. The last guys at the very top are worth 4.21. So you need, it's going to give you roughly like, it's going to net you about 12.5%. So you want to be going up with about 87.5. Typically the number you want to go up with is like 87.5 or 87.7, I think, if you pull. This route was weird that we did in this specific run, but if you go up with like 87, 88 is where you want to be. You don't want to be much higher than that. And at like 86.6, this is 1% short. So that's like the last big tip about this dungeon, is like the percentage you need to go up with is 87.5, 87.7. Typically that's what the standard route's going to look like. But that's not my last tip. So we got one more for you. Let's talk about which order you should pull these mobs in. So there's 3 mini boss mobs. You have, so we're facing out towards the dungeon we just flew up. We landed, big angel ladies behind us. You always, I mean, there's 2 options here, right? It depends how much you like playing with Charge Spear. I hate Charge Spear. My group hates Charge Spear. It's annoying for ranged staff to dodge it. It's annoying for some players who don't play on like the best graphic settings to try to maneuver to the right location. So you don't want to have handle Charge Spear, or if you don't like working with Charge Spear, you obviously don't want to pull this mob first. You should never ever pull the right side, this far one, in any order besides last. Like this one should always be last because it's making you take increased damage over time, or it's making you take damage over time stacking up. And then this middle one makes you take increased damage taken. And then this far one is just Charge Spear, literally. So you always either pull left, then middle, or you pull middle, left, and then right. Right should always be last. It should always be middle, left, or left, middle. Depends on what your group prefers. If you guys prefer Charge Spear over just having increased damage taken, the reason you go increased damage taken then Charge Spear is because Charge Spear is dodgeable. It's avoidable. If you have players who are bad at dodging the black lines on the ground that pulse out from the spear, Spear might be a better play to do it first, because that means when you're doing, you won't be taking increased damage from the first round. Though you have one less set of spears to deal with if you pull the middle one first, which I think is Lexus. Yeah, so Lexus, Astranos, and then Klodos. So Klodos is last all the time. Never pull Klodos first, never pull him second. Especially if you're pulling, just no. There are people who like to pull all 3 together and blow them all up, but honestly, this should only ever be done if you have a fire mage in your group or DPS who have insane burst cooldowns. Fire mages, boomkins, arguably if they have convoke, but that's only if you get like a good full moon. Marksmanship hunters are decent at this. Like anything that could do really good spread pressure or stacked cleave is good. This is going to be a good play for. But typically, when it comes to order, Lexus followed by Klodos. Astranos, and then Klodos. Klodos last. But that's it. That's my tips. That's my tips for this dungeon. I felt like there was a lot of talked about. I've ran 14 of these keys over the last 2 days on my shaman, and I'm probably going to be running more tonight. But I wanted to make a general video talking about some just general tips, because I feel like a lot of people don't know some of these things. So So I just felt like a lot of people didn't really know a lot about this dungeon or like a lot of the specifics. So some of these things do matter, and they make your dungeon run so much smoother. So if you try them out in your next Spires of Ascension run, you might actually enjoy this dungeon a little bit more than you have. So I hope that helps. I hope you guys learned something from this kind of video style. I'm going to be doing some more of these dungeons in the future. I feel like some dungeons have more like tricks to them than others. Like Halls of Atonement, for example, I just don't feel like there's much to talk about in that run because it's very straightforward. It's very clear on what to do. But in Spires of Ascension, you know, you have different paths you can take. You have a lot of different intricate mobs that you can handle. And then there's obviously things like this where like how you pull it in which order is going to make or break like the run. I've had a lot of wipes here that have burnt the key, and I've had keys here that we pull these in the right order and it's a super smooth run. So I didn't really want to cover bosses either in this because I've been doing boss guides, but this is a series I'm looking at kind of doing. There aren't a lot of dungeons to talk about, but if there is a dungeon you'd like to know some tricks on or that you've been struggling with pugs, let me know and I can try to cover a tip video in that one. Don't know when I'll do this kind of video again, but hopefully in the near future. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your evening or day or whenever you're watching this video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.